Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you again today. This morning, we'll be talking about money and giving. And right away, I know that a lot of you hate that I'm going to be talking about it for all kinds of different reasons. Some of you, it's because you've been to churches where there's been abuse in that area. There's certain pastors that try to rip off the congregation. Others, you think right away, as soon as I talk about money, you think, he has no business telling me what to do with my money. My money, can't tell me what to do with it. Let me just tell you where I'm coming from. It's, first of all, I, like most preachers I know, I hate talking about money. There's only a handful of preachers, really, as far as I know, who actually really like talking about money. Those pastors that really like talking about it tend to be the ones that rip off their congregation and that like to live that crazy opulent lifestyle. So what happens with a lot of us is that we end up not talking about it at all, and that's a problem because the Bible talks about money quite a bit. It talks about money, wealth, giving. Talks about it a lot, so that's a problem. Not talking about it at all is kind of another extreme. I also just want to dispel any ideas that you might have about me. First of all, I don't have a financial stake here. I'm not going to make any more money if you guys give more next week. I do receive a small fee for preaching. That isn't changing as far as I know. I didn't get into preaching to get rich. Neither do most preachers that I know. You can ask any preacher that you know if they got into it to get rich, and especially how that's worked out for them. For most people, they would have been much better off going into literally any other line of work. So you might think, we pay him $75 for 1 hour of work. That's pretty, $75 an hour is pretty good. No, it's if you count the hours of preparation, it's less than minimum wage. I'd be much better off flipping burgers. So I'm not saying this to guilt any of you. I'm not interested in any gifts that you might want to offer because you feel bad after this. I'm doing okay. I have another job. I do all right. My point is, I'm not in this for the money, and I'm not saying anything that I say this morning to get more money out of you. My main thing is I want you all to live like Jesus wants you to live. That's the important thing. To live the way that's pleasing to God, and that includes how we manage our money. So what I want to go over this morning is a bit of a biblical view of money. I want to start with 1 Timothy 6, verses 9 and 10. 1 Timothy 6, verse 9 and 10, it says, "But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation, into a snare, into many senseless and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs." So what that shows us is that the desire to get rich, it's a temptation and a trap. The verse says that this desire to get rich, this innate desire that all of us have to make a lot of money, get rich, it is a trap, and it leads us to all kinds of folly. Some of you will do crazy things like spend crazy hours at the office to try and get a little bit richer. Some of you will lie and cheat on your taxes. Some of you may also adopt dishonest business practices. It's all things that we tend to do to try and get richer. And it's all a trap. Politics tends to be a bit of a slave to this. You see almost every political party, except maybe the Rhinoceros Party, if you will, they have their answer to the question, how will we make the people rich? They all have their answers to the question. It differs, but they all have their answer to the question, how will we make people rich? Some parties, it's going to be by maintaining a balanced budget. Some of them it's by keeping the immigrants out to keep them from getting the good jobs that pay really well. Some of them it's by taking from the rich and giving money to the poor. But every political party has their answer to the question: how will we make people rich? So it's a powerful issue. And my goal this morning isn't to comment on what the best way to make people rich is, but my point is just to show you that is something that people listen to: money. How will you give us money? How will you help us make more money? It's such a powerful issue. Because everybody has that desire born in them to be rich. When you look at the crisis that we're going through with COVID-19, there's a lot of people who their only fear was that the economy would go down the drain and that they would lose money and go into poverty. Or not even necessarily go into poverty, but some people it's just I might not be able to take that trip this year if the economy goes down. And some people were and are still willing to sacrifice thousands of lives, all so that we can protect the precious economy. And I don't want to get into a debate about whether or not staying confined is the best idea. My point is just to make you realize what a lot of people thought of when we talked about confinement right at the beginning was, oh my goodness, my money. So for a lot of people, they were willing to sacrifice thousands of people to the economy. And we can debate for a long time about whether confinement actually saves lives, and that's not my point. My point this morning is just to show you a lot of people, what they were saying was, yes, we could save lives through confinement, but at what cost? Our economy and therefore our money? No way. And we see the same temptation coming into the church. A lot of preachers, preach what we call the prosperity gospel. It's this belief that Jesus is going to make you rich, and Jesus' whole goal is to make you rich. He didn't have a place to lay his head, but doesn't matter. He's going to make you rich. And you have some preachers like Jesse Duplantis, Ken Copeland, T.D. Jakes, Joel Osteen, Creflo Dollar. That's his real name. They preach this prosperity gospel, this idea that if you come to Jesus, he'll make you rich. And just a quick side note, if you're planning on making a career as a prosperity gospel preacher, maybe don't pick a name like Creflo Dollar, because that's not actually his real name. Don't pick a name like that lets people in on what on what's most important to you. That one's for free. But these preachers, they have the nicest suits, they have private jets. One of them, Jesse Duplantis, a couple of years ago, he was looking to replace his private jet, which had nothing wrong with it, for another jet, which cost $54 million. And he was asking for people to give him money so that he could buy this jet, which was $54 million. Which is pretty incredible. And so these preachers, what they'll say is, if you believe in Jesus, and you have enough faith, you too can live like they do. And the fact is, if you come to Jesus for money, it's money that you love, not Jesus. What these preachers don't, will also say is that in order to become rich, you have to send money to them, obviously. And then that money is like seed money that you plant in the ground, and then eventually you have a money tree that pops out, and that's how these people become rich. The fact is, money is very puny. It doesn't last for long. What we need to come to God for is for salvation in His Son Jesus. The greatest riches in the whole world don't compare to Jesus. So we need to not come to Jesus for money. Jesus isn't some ATM machine that's going to make you rich. If you come out to Jesus for money, then you love money, not Jesus. There's no belief that's more arrogant and more selfish than that. 1 Timothy 6:10 says that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. This pretty self-evident. You know as well as I do. People suffer all over the world because some people want to get rich. There's people who have to work in horrible conditions in third world countries, receiving very little for what they do. Also, that some fat cats with the suit can make a little bit more money, can buy their sixth boat. And it's not only them, though. It's not only the fat cats with the suits trying to buy their sixth boat. It's also on us. Some of us, we don't want to pay full price for what it would actually cost to make something if we paid everyone fairly along the way. We are looking to save just a few dollars, and we are willing to accept those conditions. We want to be able to live a little bit better, and if some people have to live basically in slavery for that to happen, too bad. I don't need to get into it a little bit more. You're all well aware of how that works. And so we all want to have a little bit more money. We all want to have a little bit more. We all think that if we had just a little bit more, everything would be better. I have a quote by Mark Driscoll here. It says, sorry, you might be hearing some sirens out in the street. Sorry about that. A quote by Mark Driscoll says, every one of us believes if we had 10-20% more income, I'd have a better life. If I could just pay that off or purchase that, I would be better. If I could just have more money, I would have a better life. But then the faith then is in the money, not God. The security is in the stuff, not God. And so the worship is for the stuff, not God. And how true it is, a lot of us, that's how we think. We just think, well, if I just had a little bit more, I'd do okay. If I could just have a little more, then I'd be able to give a bit more to God. If I could just pay off that loan, I'd be okay. But then if that's the case, then your faith is in money. At this point, I also just want to mention, being rich in and of itself, it's not wrong. There's a lot of examples in the Bible of people who became rich. There's in the Old Testament, Abraham, David, though David was a king, so he did all right for himself. Then there's in the New Testament, Joseph of Arimathea, who's the man who prepared the burial of Jesus, who gave Jesus his own tomb. Philemon, one of the books the New Testament is named after him. There's also Solomon. He was someone who became very rich, but in the end, that ended up being part of his downfall. So being rich in and of itself is not something that's wrong. It's the desire to be rich that is something that's wrong. And some of you may make a lot of money, and that's not wrong in and of itself. It's the way that you go to get there. And if you have this desire that just tramples everything else to get rich, that's where the problem is. Another thing I just want you to realize is you are rich. You who I'm talking to, you are rich. None of us really believes that we're rich. Whenever I mention the rich, you're thinking, oh, Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos or whatever. No, I'm talking about you. You who had 3 meals yesterday. You who's planning on having 3 meals today. You who's driving to the store. Unless you're really in the situation where you honestly don't know where your next meal is coming from. Okay, I might be, if there are some people like that are listening, maybe I'm not talking about you, but for the vast majority of people, vast majority of North Americans, you are rich. And I know this, for some of you, since I know that there's a lot of you who are from outside of North America, you actually know what poverty is a lot better than I do. This doesn't come as a surprise. What might come as a surprise is the fact that most North Americans don't think they are rich. And you might be surprised to hear that, but it's true. Most North Americans, when they hear the word rich, they think Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, one of those billionaires. But no, the fact is, North Americans, the average or even below average North American, does pretty well. So whenever we talk about the rich in the Bible, we need to remember it's talking about us. And so being rich, so for the vast majority of you who I'm talking to, you are rich. It's not always the guy who has more who's rich, it's you. Being rich carries with it the added responsibility to give more. 1 Timothy 6:17, it says, "As for the rich," so all of you, in this present age, charge them not to be haughty, nor to set their hopes on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly provides us with everything to enjoy. They are to do good, to be rich in good works, to be generous and ready to share, thus storing up treasure for themselves as a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of what is truly life. And so when God gives wealth, he does it so that not so that we can increase our standard of living, but so that we can increase our standard of giving. If, for example, I were to give tomorrow morning, not that I have the ability to do this, but if I were to give most of you $10,000, you'd have an extra $10,000 in your bank account. What would you do with it? A lot of us, our first reflex is, oh my goodness, I'd go on a nice trip. Or, oh yeah, I'd buy that nice car, or I'd have a down payment for that house I've been wanting to buy. There's a lot of different things you'd think, and a lot of times all of that is increasing our standard of living. But that's not why God gives us wealth. He gives us wealth so that we can increase our standard of giving. And so, and also another verse that talks about it, Ephesians 4:28 talks about how let he who steals steal no more, but let him work with his hands so that he has something to give. So one of the main reasons why we need to work and work hard is so that we have something to give, something to share. And so, that is why our wealth needs to needs to be a means by which we help people, by which we give to people. And then so next question is, where does wealth come from? Very important question, how you answer that. Deuteronomy 8:17 says, "Beware lest you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gotten me this wealth. You shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you power to get wealth, that he may confirm his covenant that he swore to your fathers, as it is this day." Reminds me of a TV show I once saw where a family was sitting down for Thanksgiving, and they all sat down with this nice big meal, and the eldest son was charged with praying to God before the meal. And he sits down, looks around, and he just kind of says, "Well, God, looks like we got all this ourselves. Thanks for nothing. Amen." And that's often our thought is, well, all this stuff I have, this house, this computer, this car, my food, I work for that, so it's mine. The fact is, you need to remember, he is the one, the Bible says, he's the one who gives you power to get wealth. So what that means is, God's the one who gives you the ability, that ability to get up in the morning, that breath that you take that helps you get through the day. God's the one who gives you that. The intelligence that you had to go study and go to school and get a job. God gave you that. That money that those clients are spending, that's allowing you to have a salary. God made that. So all of it comes from God. Wealth in all its forms also belongs to God. Psalm 50 verse 10 says that God owns cattle on 1,000 hills. He owns all the animals which back then was one of the main forms of currency. So the animals, those all belong to God. And then in Haggai 2 verse 8, it says that all the silver and gold belong to God. So all the credit cards, the money, all the bank accounts might have our name on it, but it actually all belongs to God. And then also James 1:16 and 18 says that every good gift comes from God. So this is something that we need to really change in our way of thinking. Everything that we have, everything that's around us, all of it belongs to God. This is what's going to revolutionize the way that you think about money. It's what needs to change the most. And honestly, most of you don't believe it. I don't fully believe it. But the fact is, everything belongs to God. You shouldn't say this is my cup, this is my computer here. No, none of it actually belongs to you. None of it actually belongs to me. It all belongs to God. So the question then, when it comes to our wealth, it's not how much of our money that we will give to God. The question is how much of God's money that we should keep for our personal use. So I'll say it again. The question is not how much of our money we should give to God. It's how much of God's money that we should keep for our personal use. And so if everything belongs to God, this leads me to the next point, which is what is stewardship? If everything belongs to God, we are His stewards. We are responsible for managing part of His wealth. We need to not see ourselves as the owner of our stuff, but rather as kind of an account manager. We manage part of God's portfolio, if you will. What we would say is ours is actually God's, and we are just in charge of managing it. To illustrate that, my wife and I we've opened an education savings plan for our daughter. So every month there's money that's taken from our bank account and that goes into an account. And this account is managed by our financial advisor. And our financial advisor, her job is to manage this money. This is an important task that we've entrusted to her. Her job is to take this money, invest it in the right places, gain interest on it, and then the idea is that after 18 years or so, there will be more money than what we put in. And there's a little percentage of that goes to our financial advisor for her services, and that's okay. She needs to eat. But what we don't want is to arrive in 18 years and for Annabelle to only get that money out of an account and for there to only be like $200. That'd be a problem. So our financial advisor needs to manage this money well. It's an important responsibility that we've entrusted to her. And obviously, if she does it well, we will entrust more things to her. And the Bible actually says that if we keep everything for ourselves, we're actually robbing God. Malachi 3:8-10 says, "Will a man rob God? Yet you are robbing me. But you say, how have we robbed you? In your tithes and contributions. You are cursed with a curse, for you are robbing me, the whole nation of you. Bring the full tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house, and thereby put me to the test, said the Lord of hosts, if I will not open the windows of heaven for you and pour down for you a blessing until there is no more need." This verse is hard to understand if we still have the vision that all our stuff is actually ours. Because, you might think, well, God's saying that we're robbing Him by not giving. And so, you might think, well, come on, why is God thinking I'm robbing Him? I mean, he should be happy that I'm giving Him $2 a month. I mean, I don't have to give Him anything. It's my stuff. However, if we adopt the idea that everything belongs to God, then it makes more sense. To take the example of my financial advisor again, If she takes all the money that we entrust to her and then goes out and buys a car, that would be robbing us. And then if she turned around and said, well, what do you mean I robbed you? This is my money. We'd say, no, this is our money that we've entrusted to you, and you used it for yourself. And so it's the same thing with us. We have God's money, God's riches, and if we use it frivolously, we are actually robbing God. Imagine also that you came across a homeless person. They said, I need a bit of money. I haven't eaten in a few days. My kids haven't eaten in a few days, and I just want a bit of money just to go get them some food. And then, so you pull out your wallet, give them a few 20s, and next thing you know, they walk in. They go into the liquor store. Kind of funny in Sherbrooke here, all the homeless people actually hang out right by they're really not subtle. They tend to hang out right by the SAQ, the liquor store. They're really not subtle about it. But in any case, if you saw the homeless person go right into the liquor store with that money that you gave them, you'd say, well, that person's not a very good steward. They're not managing well the wealth that you gave them. They're not using it for what you gave it to them. And then if that person came back to you and said, well, I'm having financial issues. Can you just give me a bit of money so I can make my rent this month? You rightfully say no. And we do the same thing with God sometimes. He entrusts money to us, and then we don't give anything to him. And then when we run into financial issues, we turn to God and we say, oh, God, please, I want a miracle. And it's kind of crazy when you think about it that way. So, and which leads me to my next point, which is God has no reason to entrust us with any more money if we aren't doing a good job of managing what he's already entrusted to us. So there's a parable in the Bible that we call the parable of the talents. So it's a pretty well-known parable, but I'll just summarize it. Basically, a rich man goes on a trip, and he has 3 servants, and he entrusts each of them with a different amount of money. First guy, he gives him 5 talents, which is a large amount of money. So it's $50,000. And then the second guy, he entrusts him $30,000, and the last one, $10,000. And so he goes on his trip, and then he comes back, and at his return, the guy with the $50,000, he says, "Hey, look, I invested the money really well, and I have $50,000 more. I have $100,000 now." Second guy, same thing. He had $30,000. He says, "I have $30,000 more. I have $60,000 now." And so the rich man is happy with those 2 guys. And then the last guy though, the one with the 10,000, he just buried his money, so he just gives it back. He says, "Here you go. Here's your 10,000." And the rich man is upset with him for not doing anything, for not even putting it in the bank and collecting interest. And the moral of the story at the end, if you will, is that the guys who actually manage their wealth well, they are given even bigger responsibilities, and the other guy, well, he doesn't get anything else. He's not entrusted with anything else. And it's the same thing with us. If we want God to trust us with big things in His kingdom, we need to entrust to do well with what He's already entrusted to us. And we often apply this parable to strictly to it's parable of the talents. So we make the parallel with our talents, our abilities. You need to do a lot with your abilities. But the fact is, this is talking about money specifically. Not that it doesn't apply to our talents and our gifts, but it actually applies much better to the money that God has given us, the wealth that He's entrusted to us. So what should we do now at this point? So first of all, so we need to change our view of money. We need to adopt this biblical view of money, that everything belongs to God. We need to manage well the wealth that God has entrusted to us. We need to make a budget invest, spend reasonably. God does give some of the wealth that God has given you. It is to spend on food and on life insurance, things to take care of your family. He does give you some of that, and I don't believe it is a sin to treat yourself once in a while, but that does need to be reasonable. And every decision needs to be bathed in prayer. Every decision of what you do with your money, you need to pray about it. God, is it a good idea for us to go on this trip, or do you want us to actually do something else with this money? We need to place our trust in God rather than money. The fact is, if you are going to bed better, if you sleep better because you have a good credit score, because you have money in the bank, because your credit card is paid off, then in that case, your trust is in God, not in money. The goal of your life also must not be to accumulate wealth. It's good to work. It is good to make money, to be able to care for each other, to be able to care for the people we love. And especially to be able to give. But the goal of our life must not be to accumulate that for ourselves and increase our standard of living. And finally, we need to worship God and not our money. But rather, we need to worship God with our money. We need to worship God with our money, and need to rather than worshiping our money specifically. And next week, this is actually going to be a two-parter. We will talk about what are some practical ways that we can worship God with our money, and we will be talking about giving specifically. So, as always, it's always a pleasure to be with you, and we will be seeing you next week.